Hello everyone, it's wonderful to know you are right there waiting to watch Joy Asonye live here on Kaftan television. I am happy to know you're there, and as usual I have brought to you something that's very important. Today we'll be discussing fire, and the federal government has pledged to reposition the federal fire service for better service delivery and prompt response to disaster. The Minister of Interior, Honorable Olobo made the commitment last week Friday during a familiarization visit and tour of facilities at the headquarters of the Federal Fire Service. With this renewed hope agenda of the president, how can the fire service be repositioned as is being promised? What is that response time that indeed we can start holding the federal fire service to? When it comes to manpower, which is one of the things people have been asking, do they have enough boots on the ground? Are they also going to look that way? We'll be discussing all of this on today's edition. And in the studio with me to do justice to all of this is Abraham Paul Olobo, National Public Relations Officer of the Nigerian Federal Fire Service. Thank you so much for being part of the program.
It's my pleasure to be here, Joy. It feels good.
It feels good. It's been too long. I mean, I always like dragging you back here, but I succeeded this time. So welcome to the studio.
Yeah, it's nice to be here. Thank you very much, Joy.
We'll go for a very short break to return to discuss everything I mentioned earlier. It promises to be very interesting. How can we combat fire and reposition the Federal Fire Service to do just that? That's what we'll be discussing. Stay with us. This is still Joy Asonye Live. Welcome back from that. Like I said earlier, repositioning the Federal Fire Service for the kind of delivery that Nigeria is ripe for. Okay, Barrister Abraham, again, welcome to the studio. Let's talk about the body language of this renewed hope that has started. I mean, how are you? How is it? Is it cascading yet when it comes to these reforms and these new energies that seem to be reverberating everywhere?
Yeah, well, simply put, I think it's cascading. We're beginning to feel the impact of the Renew Hope agenda, and the Honorable Minister of Interior, Honorable Dr. Olobo, very energetic, very intelligent young man, has again reassured the service of the President's commitment to the protection of lives and property through repositioning the Federal Fire Service for fire and other related emergencies.
I mean, is this the first time we're hearing this? I mean, when a new minister is brought on board, it's only expected, and some of us just roll our eyes. What's different this time?
Well, what is different this time is the minister, immediately after being sworn in as minister, he invited all the service chiefs, but I'll speak for the Federal Fire Service that I represent. He invited the CG of the Federal Fire Service along with that service chief for an on-the-spot assessment and briefing of the state of the service. And the Controller General Engineer Jaji Abdugani was able to take the minister, through the history, of the Federal Fire Service from 1901 to 2015, and then to, where we are as of today. Interesting for Nigerians to note is that the Federal Fire Service was actually an offshoot of the Nigeria Police Fire Brigade, and then in 1963, by Act of Parliament, the Federal Fire Service was established, right. And since then we have been rolling. But very importantly is the fact that it was the Buhari-led administration, the tail end of the Jonathan's administration into the Buhari-led administration, and through the Buhari-led administration we had retired General Dambazo and then Ogbeni Rahu Aregbesola as ministers that actually started the process of repositioning the service. Before that time, we had 3 appliances, moribund, 1 in Lagos, 2 in Abuja. But today I can tell you that we have over 106 state-of-the-art firefighting appliances. But beyond the infrastructure and all of that, when the minister took office after his swearing in, he called for this briefing. He was properly briefed, so he understood the state of the service, and then he made commitment, to the Controller General, and then it was the offshoot of that briefing that brought him to the national headquarters of the Federal Fire Service, where he took a tour of the facilities, took a tour of the infrastructure, and then had interaction with the personnel, both at the very highest level and then at the mid-level. And then, and it was from there we could tell that it's not just a political statement when the minister says, look, I am going to reposition the Federal Fire Service for better service delivery. He is walking his talk,
right?
Because he's asking questions, intelligent questions, smart questions, questions that tells you he knows what he wants to do and he knows how he wants to go about getting it done. It's just that there must be synergy, there must be, a work, because it's a going concern, so he's looking at, okay, the collaborations and what we need to do to get those results out. Okay, so he's talking, for example, for the Federal Fire Service, he has a two-pronged approach. One, increase fire stations, which in effect will reduce response time. And of course, that's an intelligent thing to say.
Right.
And so he's looking at economic centers. He's looking at those places where we lose billions of naira, fires, public buildings, markets, and all of that. And say, okay, we need to increase our fire stations.
Right.
And if we increase our fire stations, it will definitely reduce response time. And the issue with fire is your response time. If you arrive late, the havoc would have been done. If you arrive early enough, you would have reduced and mitigate the effect of that fire. And then he's talking preventive. He's telling the Controller General, you need to be on TV, you need to be on radio, you need to, I want to see you everywhere. And I want your KPI. I want your key performance indicators. I want to see what you're doing for this month. I want you to see what you plan to do in the next 3 months. I want to have it on my table. I mean, that's not business as usual. That's not political talk, if you understand what I mean. So he's not just asking questions. He's also saying, okay, go and bring your plan. Write it out. Draw a calendar of activity that you want to do, and let me see how you want to get it done. And let me know the areas that I need to come in. And that is why I think that is not the regular, maybe political statement. No. He is working his talk.
While we celebrate such moves, and it seems like he's positioning himself so that he can see these changes in the Federal Fire Service, one would ask the personnel welfare. Are there talks about that? Because it's one thing to say, oh, increase response time, increase the fire service stations, but what happens to these men who have to risk it all sometimes just to ensure that lives and properties are saved?
When the minister came to the service on a familiarization visit, virtually every officer in that hall, even his own entourage, was blown away by his attitude and disposition to the sacrifice. For the first time in the service, a minister looked at officers on the face and said, I want to tell you that I appreciate you. I want to tell you that Mr. President is grateful for the level of sacrifices that you make.
Exactly.
I want to tell you that the Nigerian states cannot do without the Federal Fire Service. We've never heard those kind of things before. On the job. This was a minister who went and was hugging firemen in Tunic. He was actually giving them a hug and a pat on their back. So the welfare of the personnel, from his disposition, he knows what it is. And you know that every time you get a pat on your back, it's a propeller, it's a moral booster to set you up to want to do better. And this minister is bringing that. The first day is coming, he's saying, thank you, I appreciate you. I'm here to thank you on behalf of Mr. President. I'm here to thank you on behalf of Nigerians. I want to tell you that the fire service is indispensable. Those are not Those are not cheap talks.
And yet, there are still talks.
No.
There are still talks. I mean, you are the PRO. I'm sure you relate with the men just as much as you relate with government. You understand exactly what's going on. And I'm sure you know that as much as your morale is boosted at the time the minister came and patted you at the back, said all the right words, you still have to pay so much transportation back. You probably do not even have housing and all of that. There's so much that allowances that should be paid that is due to a fireman. Is that all addressed?
Well, I started with what he said,
right, and
I'm still going into the steps that are going to be taken. For example, the minister told us in very clear terms that I will ensure you have a befitting national headquarters in Abuja. Joy, we started in 1901, but we still don't have a befitting national headquarters. And the minister said, look, I'm going to ensure that you don't just look good in your uniforms. I'm going to ensure you have a befitting office. That for us is a moral booster. And he says he's going to use the influence of his office, the might of his office, to ensure that that happens. That is by the side. The minister also said, okay, when the challenges of the service were reeled out, which include shortage in manpower, accommodation, a national headquarters, infrastructure gap, the minister said that, look, all of these things and much more, he is going to make sure he addresses it. And I think that he has the right disposition. Okay, if somebody appreciates you, then the person will again want to know where you stay and how you're faring.
Right.
Like I told you, I've not seen a minister hug a fireman in Tunique. That was my first time in this part of the world. He said, look, you guys are heroes. Thumbs up. We need those kind of statements. And coming from a minister, you know, to an everyday man or an everyday fireman who is just doing his own job. You know, it was for us much more than words. It was comfort, it was soothing. Joy, it was an enabler, and it was a morale booster across the rank.
It's one thing to have more fire stations, but sometimes that does not really mean translate that the response time will be quicker. There was such a time. I'm not saying it's now.
No, when you say,
I'm not saying that it's now.
Before you get there, when you talk about response time, it's a function of fire station. I
agree with you.
Do you get what I'm saying? Because if you have a fire station on your street or in your neighborhood, once there's an emergency and you call the national emergency number, we're going to turn out the nearest fire station to you.
We've also had cases where there's no water, it's just the response you get.
And I've always told
yes, but you must agree that we've had that too.
No water or no
we don't have diesel to
has
move.
Nothing, absolutely nothing to do with the Federal Fire Service. Maybe again we need to draw a demarcation between the Federal Fire Service and state fire services, or even privately owned fire stations. But if it has to do with the Federal Fire Service, we have nothing to do with water, no water, or we have nothing to do with we don't have diesels. No. The issue we have always had is the distance from the fire station to the scene of the fire.
Maybe you have to educate us a bit here, because you just said something that piqued my attention. Now you said it might be different when it comes to state fire services. So,
you know, when there's a call, when there's a fire call,
right?
Okay, even if you call our national control room, that's administer, you know, fire calls across the country. When you make that call, it is our responsibility from our data repository center to turn out the nearest fire station. And this nearest fire station ordinarily may not be owned by the Federal Fire Service. You get what I'm saying? So I give you an example. We're in Abuja now. Right. If there's a fire, let's say in Buhari, we may have to turn out the nearest fire station, which will be in Kubwa.
Which is the FCT owned.
Right now we have a Metropolitan, but before the Metropolitan Fire Station, which is in Kubwa by Duse Market, there was a time that we had to turn from the Public Service Institute, which is FCT owned. Okay, so people don't have those demarcations. When we get a fire call in a state, you know, in a local government, and the nearest fire station to that local government is owned by the state, we're going to turn them out. Okay, when you see the pictures and the images and the tanks and the firefighting equipment we have at the Federal Fire Service. Joy, again, I must tell Nigerians, I must again let Nigerians know we have no business with no water or no diesel. That has nothing to do with us. We are repositioned to deliver, on our mandate.
Okay, whose mandate is it to ensure that even those state-owned fire service is repositioned?
Joy, state fire services and the Federal Fire Service are on the concurrent list. Right. As much power as we have at the federal, that's what the state has. You get what I'm saying? And it is not our responsibility to fund them, fuel them, or provide water for them, as the case may be. I'm not saying that state fire services go about without diesel or water. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that if there's a mix-up and they say there's no water or there's no diesel, it has nothing.
It might not have been the Federal Fire Service.
No, not might. It has nothing, Joy, to do with the Federal Fire Service.
Okay. Now that you have cleared that up, because I needed, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers right now are happy to get that clarification. So how can we ensure that this repositioning indeed happens and it's not just talk? Like you said, talk is cheap. We're in the media, for instance. How can we put fire, because I'm all for fire, even though you quench it. Yeah. I'm all for fire to get that development that is promised.
Yeah, Joy. Well, like I said, KPI is an international way of measuring performance.
Right.
And the Honorable Minister have said, I want to see your KPIs. I want to see your plan. And every month, every 2 weeks, every quarter, you must come and brief me. That in itself is
I'm talking about strategies for implementation here.
That's
that I want to personally, because you know me, I am very interested in the firefighting. So I want to personally follow with the key performance indicators. Yeah. So when do I start seeing strategies being rolled out? What are the indices that will make me know that this was not just...
for example, right now in our station, we have 15 Ford enhanced rapid intervention trucks.
That's what I like to hear.
Yeah, 15 of them. More are on the way. Why the 15 rapid? The essence for the rapid intervention is so that we can draw closer to the people, closer to the markets. Now, the markets that we have, a lot of times it's difficult to maneuver with the very massive fire trucks. So the rapid intervention trucks are actually supposed to be positioned in a way that they can actually easily move. Now, when you say, what are the other strategy? I told you repeatedly, the minister said, I want to see you on TV. I want to see you on radio. I want to see you in marketplaces. I don't just want to see you, I want to see your plan. Exactly. And I want to see how you have done it. I want to see pictures. Okay, those are strategies that in the coming days you're going to, see them. When those 15 rapid intervention is gone out, more will come. And the essence is that again and again, we're going to begin to have, he also promised that the issue of inadequate manpower, he's going to work on it. So I hope that in not too long from now, we're going to increase our manpower. The essence is that when you have fire stations, you need men to man it. He talked very extensively on training. That's another area, that he's very excited about. He talked extensively on training. Train the workforce that we have, train the workforce that we're going to get, and other things. But beyond all this that I've said, we have a kind of renewed energy. In the said visit, the minister also promised contractors. I know that some of you, your payments have delayed and all that. Be rest assured that I will take it up and ensure that all debts, are paid. Because I just want to see everything moving.
Okay. Then now let's go to budgetary constraints. See, this is big talk, and some of us who watched that the minister talk at the time during that visit, we were concerned. Can Nigeria fund all this big talk? It seems like we're speaking from a bubble when other sectors seems to be struggling, and here are huge promises being made. Budgetary constraints, is it indeed something that is legitimate for people to be concerned about? But we don't have enough money. We may not have enough money, but we have a minister and a controller general that are dynamic, that are looking at innovations
another innovative and creative ways to drive the service.
Such as the Federal Fire Service, how can you innovatively drive it without funds?
No. Okay, Joy, I give you an example.
Okay.
We're looking at high economic points in Nigeria, major markets in Nigeria.
Okay.
Federal Fire Service, if we take the initiative that the minister is bringing, we go to those high economic points and create a station, a fire post, okay? With the fire post come the rapid intervention truck. Are you with me? We provide the manpower. I am sure that in that hub, that economic hub, the various associations and groups, we're engaging them, okay? That's creativity. We're engaging them in a way that they see what we're trying to do for them, and of course, they're also trying to see what they can do. You understand? And note that fire stations in Nigeria are owned by the federal government, by the state governments, by local governments, and also by private individuals or private organizations. So we have started drawing a roadmap that we're going to be engaging estates. Okay, very recently, the president of the Institute for Estate Surveyors was in the office. Again, we're looking at those institutions: MAN, Engineering Society of Nigeria, REDAN, Estate Surveyors, and Valuers. We're looking at those partnerships. So in an estate, I'm sure that if you see the level of investment in such an estate, we're able to partner with them. So government may not be able to fund everything, okay, but at least we are creating a platform that people can take off from. Today, the Controller General hosted the commandant of the Defense Intelligence College. Again, is in partnership, looking at ways that we can work with other agencies of government, work with private individuals, work with institutions, work with market associations and all of that. So those innovations and creativity, in my view, will again drive this whole process.
Isn't it another burden on the already burdened Nigerians who are experiencing serious, harrowing economic challenges?
Well, I wouldn't consider it a burden because it's safety first. You have to be alive. You have to be alive before you consider economic hallowing.
Well, I'm paying taxes so that the government would ensure that should I have a fire incident, I would not need out-of-pocket expense, or having paid again. Well, these are people, Nigerians, who are already paying for security. They are paying to have their roads fixed. So when you now say these innovative ways and engagement, that would you think is another harrowing experience?
No, because we're not going to the we're not executive beggars. We're not going to the streets and asking people. Well, there are people that can support us. The private sector has a huge reserve of resources, especially when it has to do with the protection of their own lives and properties.
Of course.
That's what I'm saying. So we know the level of investment that the big markets have seated. So if you bring anything that is going to further protect their investment, I'm sure they will jump on it. And they've shown a lot of excitement.
Well, so they have.
They have shown a lot of excitement. So we're not going to Nigerians on the street to say, we need your assistance. That's not what we're saying. We're saying that we're looking for private-public partnership that can further drive the protection of life and property from fire and other related emergencies. Okay,
we actually digressed rather a bit there when you were talking about these rapid vehicles that would have better access, and it was provided recently.
Yes,
that's where you stopped in the conversation.
Yes, so they're there, and the idea is that they're going to be deployed. Not long from now, the minister will commission them, and then they'll be deployed. You said 15? 15 of them, 15.
Would that suffice?
No, it will not suffice, but that's not where we used to be. So it's a work it's a work in progress. That's not where we used to be. So after that 15 is, distributed across the country, we'll work at getting more.
work at getting more. Is it a promise for getting more? Is it in phases?
Because Joy, you see, it's a project.
Forgive me, I'm like the average Nigerian who has trust issues and have had it for a long time.
And that's why I'm here.
Right.
That's why I'm here. So that you know that, okay, government is not sleeping, the Federal Fire Service is concerned, the minister is concerned. He wants the economic hub to be protected because he knows the trillions of naira that can go up in flames and possibly never come back, you know, and he says we must protect those hubs. Okay, and so yes, and it's in phases. We can't do all of it in one day.
Right.
Remember, we started as an institution in 1901, and now we're in 2023. There was a time we had 3 appliances. Today we have over 100 appliances. There was a time we had no ambulance. Today we have over 20 ambulances, basic life support ambulances. There was a time that we had no data repository centers. Today we have data repository center across the country in all the 6 geopolitical zones. There was a time that we had no training school. Today we have a National Fire Academy in Sheda. We have an annex in Lagos, and we have one in each of the geopolitical zones. There was a time, I mean, we had no water tenders. Today we have well over 20 water tenders. So
there's improvement.
There's a huge improvement.
Okay. Well, we've gone half hour into the conversation, and it's time to go for a short break. Like we're saying, we've been discussing fire basically and how we can reposition the Federal Fire Service of Nigeria. We'll be back after this short break. We still have so much to discuss. The attack on firemen. How can we increase their awareness so that you and I know that they are but heroes? We'll be right back. Thanks for staying with us. This is still Joy Asonye live here on Kaftan television, and we've been discussing fire. It's been very interesting. But what measures does the Nigerian Federal Fire Service putting in place to improve public awareness, especially that very ugly trend of attack on firefighters? That's where we've taken the conversation to, and we have so much more to discuss. And we still have the National Public Relations Officer, Barrister Abraham Paul Olobo, with us right here. Again, I thank you for staying with us and giving us all the many improvements and the repositioning of the Federal Fire Service right now.
Thank you.
But like I said earlier, the awareness on that ugly trend of attack on firefighters.
Very ugly, Joy. We are saddened when firemen turn out to carry out their legitimate duty, make sacrifice to protect Nigerians from fire and other related emergencies, and then the same people that they go out there to protect turn around to, assault them, obstruct them, as the case may be. And it's worthy to note that we are also not sleeping. Not too long ago, we ensured the prosecution of one of such hoodlums.
Oh, that's good. In
Oyo State. This is to serve as deterrent to others who may want to emulate, this main lifestyle of attacking firemen. We don't carry arms, we don't carry arms, and we see our responsibility more as government, social, corporate responsibility to our citizens, assuring them of protection from fire and other related emergencies. So one of the things that we are doing, or some of the things that we are doing to discourage that, like I said, prosecution. If anybody is caught within that act, doing that act or attempting to do that act, we ensure that the full route of the law takes its course. That will go a long way to deter others that may want to do that.
But what often triggers that? I mean, it doesn't make sense to do, like for somebody like me who would say these are people coming for rescue, and then you attack them. It doesn't make any sense for me. What often triggers the attack?
Well, for us, it's an unprovoked attack. For us, I mean, because just like you said, it doesn't make any sense, meaningful sense, to attack a fireman who is not carrying arms, who came to rescue you or rescue a property that may be in flames.
Exactly.
You know, so for us, it doesn't make any sense. But a lot of times they come up with excuses, and I will only say that those excuses are excuses they are making to. They are no excuse to crime. Firstly, there are no excuse to crime. If somebody steals and says because he's hungry, he's not going to exonerate the person. So what excuse will you bring to attack to a defenseless man who had come to do his civic duties, right, you know, that he owed to government and owed to you? But a lot of times they come around issues. Majorly, Nigerians may not have note. A lot of times when our men are attacked, they are attacked in very rowdy places, especially markets or public buildings. And I think, and our investigation has gone a long way to show that some of these market fires or public building fires, you have just by the sideline hoodlums and others who may want to go in there to steal. And so when firemen come, you know, they see the firemen as trying to obstruct them from carrying out their own plan. Activities. You know, so in return, they now begin to attack, and then they hide under several guys. So a lot of times that's what happened. There was a case in Port Harcourt. There was a market fire. Firemen turned out there. They got there, and then the next thing they saw people coming out from the market with machetes. How do you explain that? So, but like I said, we're prosecuting. We will prosecute anybody who takes the law into his hands and attack firemen. That's one. Another thing we're doing is enlightenment. We're beginning to talk to community leaders, youth leaders, religious organizations, market leaders, and amongst others, to understand our roles and our responsibility. Earlier on, we had a discussion around response time.
Exactly.
When we come late, it's not our own doing. Okay? It's when we get the call, when we get the fire call, that we mobilize and move. So sometimes the call don't come on time, or the fire station is a little farther from where the incident is happening. So when we come late, it's not because we want to come late. It's a circumstance that is beyond our control. Some of them hide under that guise and attack us. So we're beginning to continually engage with their leaders, community leaders, youth leaders, and women leaders, markets, you know, and all of that, to say, look, this is our role, this is our responsibility. We are up to it, but we have logistical challenges sometimes. Right. And so when this happens, it's not because we want it, you know. And then the Honorable Minister, part of his effort, you know, in repositioning the service is that he spoke to the Controller General and the Commandant General of the Civil Defense Corps of the need to properly work together, so that when maybe we have firemen turning out, we can get maybe a pilot, you know, of a crop of civil defense officers. Those ones are armed, you know, piloting the appliance and the men to ensure that, I mean, they don't get those backlash of attacks on firemen. But it's very saddening. And the Controller General, everybody in the service is saddened when the fireman is attacked, because they are unprotected. They go out there to save lives and property. They're not the ones who set those buildings on fire.
Exactly.
You know, and they are putting their own life on the line. So they're heroes. They should be encouraged, you know, every time they turn out for fire. These
collaborations you're talking about, how has been the reception?
Very receptive. I know that the Controller General of the Federal Fire Service and the Commandant General have set up a technical committee, because they need to work the details. You know, it's not just an Abuja thing, it's across the country. So they've set out a committee, the head of federal operation, ACG Mazo Tambari, along with his colleague at the defense, the Nigeria Civil and Security Corps. They're looking at, you know, that workability. I'm sure that in the coming days, they will brief the Commandant General and the Controller General, and then the Minister says they should bring their template. He's going to approve, so that he knows that when firemen go out, he, as Minister, can sleep and not be worried that a fireman is being attacked.
Okay, now let's go to something. I had a conversation, and I let me just ask you, you're the PRO, and you're right here. When should I call the Federal Fire Service? Is it only when there's a fire outbreak? What are those incidences that will make me call you?
Our mandate is fire and other related emergency. We are the #1 respondent when it gets to emergencies. Okay.
Do Nigerians know this?
Well, as many as are listening to me will know this, and of course, people are beginning to become aware. Okay, so when we're first responded when it gets to flood. We're first responded when it gets to rescue, collapsed building, any form of rescue. Okay, emergencies. Once it has to do with any emergency, a child falls into a well, an animal falls into a well, it's our responsibility to come there and rescue. So it's not only fire. That's why we say fire and other related emergencies. We also have the ambulance services. Nigerians may not know we have the basic life support ambulances. For example, when the collapsed building in Gariki, we were the first respondent. We're there. We're the ones that were able to evacuate, and took the people to the hospital even before any other person came. Okay, so when a car is accidented and somebody is trapped in it, we are the ones. We come and people are held in confined space. It's our responsibility. We have not experienced maybe landslides and volcano eruptions and all of that, but the Federal Fire Service, we have not experienced wildfire in this part of the globe. It's still the Federal Fire Service. Ready.
Should that happen, of course. But let's talk about the flooding that has been happening in parts of the country right now. Would you say that you have done a good job in response to that?
Firstly, especially for this year, we're still in the point of a lot of it now is around advocacy. So we're collaborating with the humanitarian ministry, with NEMA, because a lot of it for now, and then the state governments, a lot of it now is around advocacy, so that those that are in low water areas can be evacuated, before
any incident.
Before the incident, because of course we're expecting that the rains are still going to come in very torrential ways. So for that advocacy, we're doing a lot of that. And then, of course, our men, the controller general has given matching order to all the zonal controllers. Our men are on red alert. Right. If anything happens, we have divers. And it's a responsibility to go in there and do the rescue. But most importantly, we're looking at prevention. Okay, because whether firefighting or flood rescue or entrapment, it is cheaper, it's safer, and easier to prevent than to do this actual firefighting and rescue.
I mean, you just talked about having to evacuate people, especially in those points that have been highlighted. But is it often easy? I know how difficult it is sometimes to move people from their dwellings.
Yeah, and that's why it's a collaborative effort with NEMA, with the humanitarian agencies, with...
So how has it been really? Because you move them today, then you see them trickle back there afterwards.
Joy is not going to be a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right.
People are attached to their local lands or family inheritance, as the case, or trade. Some people stay in riverine areas. They have a trade that is around the river. So telling them to move, but all of that. But I can tell you that a lot of efforts and, of course, reorientation and advocacy are going into it. Of course, there's also a lot of what I refer to as handouts, trying so that to cushion the effect. Because if you move them from their trade zone, it's going to affect their business. So, but it's a huge collaboration. It's a huge collaboration between the Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs, the Federal Fire Service, NEMA, state governments, local governments, community leaders, international organizations, donor agencies, NGOs. It's a huge collaboration. But at least, if you recall, the experience we're having this year is not as worse as we had
in previous years.
Yeah. So for us, that's our key performance indicator.
Now you keep talking about awareness, to mitigate it in the first place and prevent it so it doesn't occur in the first place. So what are you doing differently? What are those strategies you are now beginning to have discovered would work in creating that awareness for electrical appliances, just so that there is a very limited fire outbreak?
Yeah. Under the leadership of the current Controller General, we started what we call the school outreach program. What does that do? We go and catch them young. Because when you talk, our research or our statistics in the office is also to the extent that a lot of the fires we have in Nigeria are electricity-based kind of fire.
Yeah.
Okay, so we do a lot of reorientation by talking to going to the schools. Okay, so across the country, we have what we call the school outreach. So firemen are deployed to go to schools, and talk to children, so they're beginning to understand and appreciate what they need to do around electrical appliances. Of course, we're also talking to community leaders. So that's a huge campaign. We also go to public places to enlighten people using megaphones and all of that, just to create some kind of sensitization using local languages, across the country, on radio, television, again and again to reorient and sensitize the people. Because for us, that's cheaper, as the case may be. And of course, we're on TV, we're on radio from time to time to also, talk to people. And then we discourage. We have a unit which is called the Inspection, Investigation and Enforcement Unit. That is the IIE. It's headed by an ACG, Oladuni, and they're across the country. This unit has the mandate of ensuring that people comply, with minimal safety standards or requirements. And so across the country, every day they go out trying to, one, sensitize the people, two, inspect, public buildings, ensure that their extinguishers are working, their smoke detectors
That's still done?
Yes, still done.
And I know there was such a time certificates would even be given.
Yes, of course. Once a building is a public building is certified fire approved, we issue a certificate which is renewed yearly. The essence is that so that in another 6 months, because the extinguishers and some of these appliances, they need to be serviced biannually, at least once, twice in a year. Every 6 months, you need to look them again and all of that.
I'm smiling because a lot of us are just learning that for the first time. After buying your fire extinguisher, I mean, it's been there.
Just look on the tag on the extinguisher. It's going to tell you when it's going to expire. But even at that, if you buy it after 6 months, it's good to refill or re-energize, as the case may be, depending on the type that you buy. And then the battery-based smoke detectors or fire alarms. I mean, you need to change the batteries. Of course. So for public buildings, we go out there and ensure that these are done. With all of that, IIE is there, so they inspect, they investigate, and where they need be, there's an enforcement. When you go and plant maybe a gas station very close to residential areas, we found out those things because of the hazard that is related, and all of that. So that's another thing we're doing in that regard. And of course, we have magazines, we have newsletters, we have flyers. Very soon the rain will be gone, and then we'll enter the dry seasons. And then we have a whole fire week. That fire week, what do? We go, this one, we just go to the street, hold carnivals, and try to talk people, of all the preventive measures they need to take, in case of fire or other.
Now, we don't hear a lot about arson. Is it because Nigerians do not delve there, or there are no forensics to know that this fire was caused by a human being?
We have the investigation unit. Like I said, we have IIE, Inspection, Investigation and Enforcement. So they have their records.
So, but arson cases in Nigeria, where are we on that?
Well, we have not so many of them, but it's not our society is not that leathered, if I were to use that word. So we don't have a lot of it, because we don't have a lot of it, quite frankly. But of course, doesn't mean that arson is like a deliberate attempt to burn down something. We don't have a lot of that, except where they have communal clashes, the headers, those clashes. Then you see that houses and farm equipment or food were touched, But to the city, a lot of times we don't have those experiences.
But do you have the forensic facilities or equipment or whatever it is to properly investigate,
tell you the source of the fire, tell you the cause of the fire, and tell you when the fire started, tell you what type of fire it is?
Wow.
Yes.
Okay. Now, the bush burning, which is part of what Nigerians use some use it to clear their farms. Others will say they are trying to pursue animals. It's a hunting expedition and all that. Have you been able to have enough collaborations with those stakeholders to ensure it comes to a minimum?
Yeah, bush burning, like I told you, as the rain goes and we go into the dry seasons, then we have our fire safety week. It's actually like a anniversary into the full dry season. And you know, for bush burning, for purposes of game, like you said, hunting or farmland clearing and all of that, it's part of the country. It's not a national scenario. You don't have
just certain regions,
certain part of the country. So for the zonal controllers in those regions, they are in talks. And of course, our statistics have shown that there's been a lot of reduction in those activities, because we try to make them understand the implication. We're a global village, and global warming
is indeed
is coming.
Right.
You know, so we're having less trees. You know, our forests are reducing. You know, and so we don't need to add to that problem. You know, and some of them are beginning to understand what we're talking about. Of course, it's also affecting them. The farmlands are no longer as fertile as they used to be, so burning it is also not going to help. You know, so they're beginning to understand that, and so with the fire week come those, and it's worthy to note that it's sectional. You know, of course, there's also a cultural part of it where people touch these places because they want to, you know, hunt games and all of that, but as we keep talking to them, they've shown a lot of understanding, quite frankly.
Why do we not have wildfires while we celebrate it? Some of us ask, some parts of the country can be very dry, but we never have those wildfires that we read about or see in other parts of the world. We are blessed like that. However, what would you say is the reason?
God has been merciful to Nigerians. That's the truth. God has been merciful. And again, the part of the country that are very dried, they don't have a lot of timber.
Right.
Okay. You know, wildfires goes with the wind and the trees and the fueling, you know, as the case may be. So God has been gracious to us. So the areas that are very dry, they don't have a lot of trees. You know, they don't have a lot of vegetations. So you can understand. So there's no enough fuel to promote or fuel wildfires, but in it all, we thank God.
Okay, so what would be your message to Nigerians listening to you right now? If I let you go, what's your message?
My message to Nigerians listening to me right now is to say that the Federal Fire Service very soon will be in your neighborhood for one reason or the other, either to inspect a building or to prevent, come on a campaign, or to even fight fire. Please support them. Don't attack firefighters. They're your friends. They're there to serve you, and have confidence, you know, in the Federal Fire Service. Engineer Jaji Abdulganiu, the Controller General of the Federal Fire Service, is passionate and is working in collaboration, you know, with the Honorable Minister of Interior to reposition the service in such a way that we're going to have more fire stations and, by extension, reduce response time.
Okay, thank you so much for being part of the program, Barrister Abraham Paul Olobo. It's always wonderful to have you talk about your organization so passionately, and we've learned a lot. I have learned a lot, for one. So we've been talking to the National Public Relations Officer, Barrister Abraham Paul Olobo, who has been with us on today's edition of Joy Asonye Live. But this is where we roll down the curtains to prepare for tomorrow. Do have a wonderful evening.